Hey everyone, it's Bookshore, and today I read Daimon by Abel Posse. Now, this is kind of somewhat of a collaborative review. It's inspired by George Saw-lis's interview with Posse, and I put those Literatos translation of that interview as well. Now, the interview will be in the description below, and if you find this review interesting, or to be honest, if you find authors' thoughts on writing and literature in general interesting, this would be a very imperative interview for you to read. He has some great comments on like the definition of history and the aspects of realism versus what is constructed in it, and just the kind of state of literature, which is as he describes it, which is kind of agreeable, depressing. But anyway, this book is about Lope de Agreda. He is a Spanish conquistador who went through Southern America, fucked everything up, pillaged. I believe he raped a lot. Just killed a bunch of the indigenous people, and he was just a straight up asshole. He just murdered everybody, and even at the end, when he was cornered, he killed his 15-year-old daughter and a lot of his men, just because he just didn't want to go down that way. He was just one of those guys that he wanted to conquer the world. And what Posse does in this book, this is part of a tetralogy, originally a trilogy, in addressing a lot of conquerors who came to the Americas and the effects that they had on the continent. And this picks up because Agreda was beheaded. So in this book, his head was accidentally put in the fountain of youth, and him and his army, come back to life. They're resurrected like 100 years later, and it's just about their travels into the modern day, coming out of the Amazon, eventually making their way back to Spain, back to the Amazon, finding El Dorado, and just kind of Agreda's life after that. And this work, the style of it is so awesome. If you're a fan of Gabriel Marquez, Luis Borges, who was friends with Posse, this is definitely within that style. It has that very Latin American tradition of just having really dense, fast third-person narration. Will events go quickly. There's a lot of stuff that you can miss really easily, and it's just filled with the magical realism. And now in this book, in some respects, I kind of like it a bit more than Marquez's uses magical realism, in that it has a very specific purpose within the book that leads to the actual thematic representations that he's trying to lend himself to. Which Marquez does as well, but I feel like this is a bit more integrated and it's used a bit more sparingly. And what I mean by that is when Posse first comes to life, something right there. But like when he's going through the Amazon, they come across a tribe of all women. They come across like two prehistoric, giant armadillos the size of elephants who start fucking each other. They come across, mermen and everything. And through that, what he's trying to do is that because a lot of indigenous history is lost through the conquistadors, much like it was with the Aztecs as well, where they were just burned, killed, thrown away, seen as sacrilegious, and then interplaced with Christian ideology. And so Posse is showing this magical realism to show the beauty of the kingdom, even though there's not a lot of information on it. He does it by showing the fantastical, the magical realism, the beautiful aspects of and the mystery of the Amazons, one that we can't capture in this life as well. So he supplements it with almost a pulpy sense of ideology. So that way later in the book, when he comes back to the Americas and he sees, the forests being cut down, toxic waste, a lot of aspects of capitalism destroying the forest, and a lot of those places not existing anymore, you feel that same sense of loss for the culture, even though it's not directly tied to the culture, but you feel that, and it's like, these beautiful aspects, these unknown aspects that now the modern man doesn't know are completely lost to us, much in the same way that their history and the mythology is lost to us in the present day. In this book, Argueda, he's a complete asshole still. He has sex with this 15-year-old daughter who he killed, has size 4 grandchildren with him, still goes around raping and pillaging, but when he comes back to Spain, he's kind of celebrated. And then, later in the book, they find El Dorado. He's not able to, they find all the gold, and they're not able to do anything with it. Like crap, we found it. How do we get this back to Spain? Because they're trying to reclaim their own fame because they have no more funds. And like the Incas see them like, hey, yeah, so we don't want you to take this back to Spain, so submit. And he submits, and he eventually leaves the group. And through leaving the group, they devolve into chaos. And, Argueda, kind of goes on a spirit quest. He finds love in Machu Picchu before it's discovered by the university scholars. and he has this really beautiful love affair, and and then things start kind of looking up for him. He starts kind of settling down, and he starts living this happy life, and to what effects is he possibly trying to get at this, showing him almost of a sympathetic, happy, almost redemptive individual. And there's two aspects to that. The first aspect is that on the macro scale is that Aguirre and his exploits in some respects don't really matter. This is mentioned in the interview as well, where George asks him why did he portray Columbus in his other book as kind of like a bumbling fool and not really pushing things directly. And Posse says because Columbus wasn't really directly responsible for a lot of the crimes in America, but he created the systems for that to be there. And that same theme is shown in this book, where despite Aguirre being lost for hundreds of years, traveling the Amazon, coming back to life, and not having power, not having his army, and not being the conquistador that he wants to be, colonialism is still taking place. Colonialism is still going forward without him, and it's a self-perpetuating machine that Aguirre has no power to stop, and his involvement within it just doesn't matter. So you see it from that level of aspect, but then also on the personal aspect of it, Aguirre has so many chances to be for redemption, and it will never work for him. On a personal level, he is not capable of being a good person. He's not capable of changing himself. His conquistador ways will always be within him. And there's three main examples of that in the book. The first one, where he does find that wife in Machu Picchu. At one point he leaves and he comes back and she's fat and old, the kids are annoying, he doesn't want to have sex with his wife because he sees that as incest, having sex with the mother of their children. He's miserable there, and she sees he finds a rusty knife, oh okay, she's planning to kill me with this knife, and he left it out to rust so it could hurt more. So eventually he just slits her throat, and he leaves. He goes on this spiritual quest where he takes a bunch of psychedelics and everything, and kind of comes into that one universal being with himself. And then he goes back to Spain, and he's not respected. He's a doddering old man. He's behind the times. He's not capable of it, and he hates how Spain went to the Republican Party. Not all Republican Party, but the liberal old image of the Republicans. And he thinks that everything has been sissified and everything, and he's just mad. And again, he's not happy. And then the third aspect, he falls and he finds his love again with a Moorish girl that he's been pining over the whole novel, and he's able to get in love with her. But then it turns out that she is working for, I believe it was Diego de Torres, and he's mad about this. Why are you working for that idiot martyr? He's so stupid, he can't do anything. Abel, and it's please work with me. He's gonna make this a better Spain. In his infinite wisdom, instead of siding with her, instead of finding love, or even just instead of stepping aside, he thinks cool, I'm gonna use this situation for political tactics, and I'm gonna help him with the revolution, and then I'm gonna take over as well. So despite all these opportunities he has to reform, to become a better person, to find the love or solace that he wants, he's never able to take it on his personal level. Another aspect of the perpetuating machine is that his children and his fellow soldiers acquire wealth later on, and his daughter is in Spain again. It's oh Dad, I'm so happy to see you still in a 15-year-old body, but she has this huge mansion. She's a part of an aristocrat. She made one of his soldiers, who's a big aristocrat now, full of money, and Aguirre is looking at the black people within there. It's oh, they're one of us now. They're on an equal basis. But in reality, they really aren't. They're still second-class citizens, and they're still subjected to that. Across the shoreline in the Americas, they're still slaves and everything. So just kind of that aspect of even if they're separated from a bit, due to colonialism, these people who took and pillaged the land, their prosperity, even if they don't hold the same conquistador ideologies, even the same colonialist ideologies, they're still benefiting from that system. And due to benefiting from that system, they're still holding down the people that were subjugated to that system. Now, I want to talk a bit more about the interview here, because it was a really good interview. Posse, being a diplomat and just, a well-traveled, well-read person, there were some things that kind of surprised me on that. This read so much like a Latin American novel, even with my limited experience within that country's literature, but I was surprised to see that he is so well-versed in American literature, and he loves American literature. That's what influenced him. When he actually has influences, he's cited stuff like Faulkner, I think Bowman as well, And, that was his bread and butter. So it was just surprising to see having such strong American sensibilities and being able to write such a beautiful Latin American style novel. Two is that, him commenting on the state of literature in itself and just how it is in a dire state, and it is, people don't care about it, and people are kind of stupid right now in this era of stupidity. It's just, and again, he's kind of behind the times a little bit on that, but there is some truth to that. But he makes the beautiful point of, if I remember correctly, of literature being with part of the individual, and things are cyclical. So pretty much keep reading, because reading is going to give you that higher meaning that you're looking for. And a lot of that is true. One thing that draws me to reading more than movies and stuff at time, or even TV shows, is that for me personally, there is that largest sense of definition in literature where we can explore themes, no matter how transgressive or abstract. I feel like that we really can't get in other visual mediums at times. There's obviously things in visual mediums that literature can't do. I feel like sometimes surrealism works really well in the visual medium sometimes, but at the same time, the most surrealist thing I've ever read in my life, Death to Pigs, I don't think is possible in any other context, or at least to that length and extent that Benjamin Pedet does in his novels. I'm probably saying wrong. Another part of the interview is he talks about history and how history is not formally constructed, in the sense that our definitions of history are just filled with fiction. It's just filled with secondhand accounts of people who had biases. And there is no really set history, and it's just that postmodern idea of it. The more you get into it, the more you're like, it's like, hey, we really don't have a set answer. This is not science here. This is all approximation. And, that's why I feel like the magical realism works so well in it, because it helps supplement those ideologies of history that we don't know about, and it also gets rid of that colonialist ideology that we had about the Aboriginal people, and it supplements it with the fantastical to give it that fantastical feeling to them again. And I guess some interviewers, George put this on the interview, but some interviewers are saying like, oh, this guy doesn't know history, this guy is like faking and everything. But it's like, dude, there is no set notion of history. Even if you go with like the first book that's considered the first entry in the genre of history, Herodotus, you go through his stuff, a lot of it's just filled with mythology. A lot of it, like, actual kings and rulers, being a direct line from Heracles, and then getting, advice from the oracles. A lot of fictional beasts in Egypt, flying serpents and whatnot, And even if you say, like, well, that's the first entry, there is accounts of, like, Trey the Explainer has a great, I'll put it in the description, has a great video on this, but, like, historical accounts of, like, man-eating wolves going around and terrorizing the countryside. History is filled with fiction. History is like, second-hand accounts aren't bad, but unfortunately they're filled with biased second-hand accounts of people who probably didn't want the native population to have much power. So, for the reviewers to say that, it's very naive and just a bit farcical as well. So I really recommend looking at that interview just to hear all his ideologies on the state of literature and his experience with literature. It's pretty amazing, and he's a pretty amazing individual. And unfortunately, he is an invisible author in Northern America. I think he's a bit more well-known down there. There's a lot of interviews with him. There's one interview where the guy, I wanted to see if I'm pronouncing his name right, and the guy went on for like a minute or two just saying all of his compliments, and it's like, Jesus, before he even said his name. But he only had 2 novels translated here. I guess there's some e-publications that have more of his novels, but like, he is not well known here, unfortunately. But the good thing is, like, I got this hardcover. I think I got it on eBay for like 10 to 15 bucks, and so did I do with Dogs of Paradise. His books are pretty cheap out there, and this thing, until I read it, was in great condition. It came with like a plastic sleeve and everything, and so, getting a hardcover for $10 for an author who's pretty unknown, and it's a great author in itself, you can definitely find his work out there, and I encourage you to go out and buy it. It is definitely worth your time. If you're a fan of Borges, if you're a fan of Marquez, in some aspects, not to say Marquez is bad, but I think just from this novel, I think I like Posse a bit more. So definitely check him out. So Abel Posse, Daimon, the way he likes to play with history, really imperative. I definitely recommend you reading it.